you doing, Met fans? And welcome to another episode of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Tower, supporting America's greatest heroes. During this holiday season, we ask you to participate in the annual T2T Season of Hope. Donate just $11 per month by going to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2t.org. I'm John Arezzi, and we are happy to welcome back for one more time this season the former manager of the New York Mets, the most tenured skipper in the history of the franchise, and analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, Mr. Terry Collins. And Terry, since our last show on November the 20th, there's really not too much going on in the Mets organization, is there?
John, you might be the only guy. I didn't think that there was a day last week that was maybe the biggest day in Mets history. So, you've been busy. I know that you've been busy, but I know you're also a huge Mets fan. So I think you're aware of the big news that came out last week.
Oh, absolutely. I've been following every single minute of the winter meetings and watching you, of course, on SNY's Baseball Night in New York with your analysis. There's been so much going on in the organization, which we're going to get to today on this edition of the show, the finale of 2024, and exciting season. So we'll get into all of that. But before we get into the leadoff and talk about the big news stories like Soto and all the other things happening in the organization, we were scheduled to have Yoenis Cespedes on the show today, and I know you've been in contact and met with him and everything else. So what's the status of what's going on with Yoenis Cespedes?
Yeah, I was, I had breakfast yesterday with Yoenis, and we talked about, how things are going with him, and he's bound and determined to try to make a comeback, wants to play with the Mets one more time. He wants to leave baseball under his terms. And of course, I think he, without a question, John, is one of the best players to ever play the game. This guy had 5 of the best tools I've ever seen. And I mean, ever seen from anybody. And he was looking forward to being on the show. And I got a text from him 10 minutes before you and I started this taping that unfortunately he'd been called away to Miami on a family issue, and he's not going to be able to be on the show tonight, which I feel real bad for him because he's, he was going to have some fun things to talk about and say. And I'm disappointed for the fans because he was certainly a fan favorite during my time in New York.
Yeah, and the promotion that he even did on his Instagram account, reposting that he'd be appearing on the show today. And I know really he wanted to come on the show to really talk about getting back in the game and specifically getting back with the New York Mets organization. A couple of weeks ago, he appeared on what was a live stream from New York Met News, which is another Instagram account that covers the Mets. And he said he wanted to come back and play only for the Mets. So if you could let us know, some of that dialogue that you had with him specifically. He was serious about wanting to make a comeback and come back to the New York Mets organization exclusively.
John, and there's not a lot of guys. This is probably 38, 39 now. There's not a lot of guys, as we all know, the deterioration of the tools as time goes on. But if there's one guy that I've ever been around who could probably do it, it would be him. This guy was as talented and is still talented. I mean, he looked absolutely tremendous yesterday. He's been hitting. He's actually hired 2 young guys to throw batting practice to him. So he's swinging. He's been throwing. He started running. So he was trying to prepare himself, and he was hoping that in the next month to go to winter ball down in Puerto Rico and play winter ball and get himself ready for spring training. So I hope that his situation's okay. And there's nothing real serious, but I know this is going to be tough for him to make a comeback. And I really told him, I said, if you come on the show, there's a lot of people are going to listen. There's a lot of people going to pay attention, and it might be a stepping stone for you. So I hope he gets back. I hope he gets himself in shape and does go to winter ball to show off his skills.
Yeah, because I know he did have like a open audition or something back in 2021, I believe it was. And for him saying he wanted to come back and go to spring training, I guess you would need an invite from the New York Mets organization as a non-roster
Right.
invitee anyway. So
Right.
this would have been a good platform for him to kind of, talk about what he's been doing, the prep, the working out, the hitting, the fact that he was passionate about getting back with the organization. Because I always felt that he had I think it was almost like unfinished business with the Mets organization, because he had wonderful seasons 2015, 2016, had injuries, and he was electrifying. He always created news one way or the other. But I think that this platform would certainly, and we hope everything is okay with him. And for you to get that text 10 minutes before we start taping, he had a family emergency. We wish him well, obviously, and we really appreciate the efforts after he reached out to you to try to make this happen, Terry. So thank you for that. I know you're disappointed as well.
Yeah, I certainly am. After our conversation yesterday, I was all fired up, and I've
I
called,
know.
told a bunch of my friends, "Hey, I'm getting Yo's going to do the show," and they were all saying, "You're kidding." I said, "Nope." And a lot of people don't think, because he always uses an interpreter, but he speaks fine English. He speaks very fluently. He's well spoken. He had some great things to say yesterday about the Mets, about the city of New York, the fan base, and that's why he wanted to end in New York. He wanted, show everybody that he was a great player and wanted to go out on his own terms. And I just hope he gets that opportunity now. I think it's going to be tough for him, but I wish him all the best.
Yeah, that's not easy, especially with how loaded the Mets roster is. And we'll segue right into that leadoff because the Mets roster has been enhanced, I would have to say, a little bit. Everybody knows by now that the biggest free agent signing in franchise history and the biggest contract in the history of North American sports was signed when Juan Soto signed a 15-year, $765 million deal to head from the Bronx to Queens. So that is signed, sealed, and delivered. Terry, you were in New York when this deal went down. Tell us about where you were when you heard about it. And did it surprise you that the bidding war went as high as it did for Soto?
I'll start out. First of all, I had did the Queens baseball convention on Saturday, and Sunday when the news came out. Monday I was going to do SNY, and of course Sal Licata is the host of the show, and Sal's a huge fan. I almost called him early Monday morning to see if had come down from the clouds yet, because he preached and preached getting Soto, and but I'll tell you, John, I'm sure Steve and David and Carlos did a tremendous job recruiting, but we all know that Steve was not going to get outbid for this, and it was going to be Juan deciding where he really wanted to play, because as we saw, the Yankee offer was pretty good too. I mean, and we also knew Scott Boras was going to get $700 million. That's just we knew that was going to come, and everybody talked 650, and I know Scott, and he's not. He's the best in the game, and he's going to get what's best for his clients. So I thought it really was going to come down to where Juan wanted to play. And, I always look at it as a player, when you're a free agent, hey, where can I be the most dynamic? Is it the Yankee Stadium? Is it Citi Field? Is it Camden Yards? Is it, what ballpark can I go play in where I can really be dynamic? And because he's a great player, he's going to be able to do it a lot of places. So I thought the job that the Mets did to bring him to Queens was a tremendous job. And I'm telling you, our fan bases, they are in for a lot of fun watching this guy play.
Yeah, it certainly it's taken over the city. It really has. If you're a Mets fan or even a Yankees fan, who the Yankee fans are certainly disappointed. But at the end of the day, when Soto needed to decide whether it was the Mets or the Yankees, do you think it was just the money, or was it the personal relationship that had been developed over the course of several weeks with Steve and Alex Cohen? There were a few meetings that took place at Steve's homes. I think when he met a second time at Steve's home in Florida, Steve was like, "We got to stop meeting like this because I'm running out of houses." So, so that stuff and the personal relationship and the little extra things that were discussed and negotiated between Soto and the Cohens, and the other aspect was the family part of it with Soto's family, because he had, what, 30 members at the press conference.
Right.
So when you look at, is it just the money, or he was going to get over 700 million, like you say, Boris, over 700 was the goal. They achieved it and then some. But what role do you think that personal relationship and Soto and his family had to come into play when it came Mets or Yankees?
I think it had a huge part of it, John. I mean, Alex Cohen has done a tremendous job revamping some of the things at Citi Field. She's redone a lot of the luxury boxes. She's really welcomed all the families. I mean, Steve and the Lindor family, they are very, very close, and it's because of Alex and the job she does, making sure it's a great place for the players to, when they know when they come to play for the New York Mets, that their families are going to be taken care of. And that's huge. That takes a big load off a lot of those guys' minds, knowing their family's in a good spot. So I think that had a lot to do with it. I think the fact that he got the suite that he wanted for his family. He had all his aunts, all his uncles there, and everybody else at the press conference, and they're all fired up. I just think it was that relationship that pushed it over the top. And I salute Steve for meeting him in California, for meeting him in Florida, and there's no question, no matter where he wanted to go, Steve was going to be there. And as I told Steve personally, he can convince you. He's one of the best sellers of products I've ever been around, and he sold the Mets as a product to Juan Soto.
Well, he is the wealthiest Mets fan in the history of sports. Steve Cohen is. But yeah, that personal touch, and even Soto early on, right after the World Series, in one of his first interviews, said that he really desires to have a closer relationship with ownership. And Cohen, as you said, is like close to some of the players. He treats them like family. But Soto, I want to talk to you about not just the ball player, who is incredible, and he's going to be amazing in the Mets uniform, and who knows what heights he's going to achieve. But he is a devoted family man, not one to really party. His reputation is that he's pretty work ethic oriented. He does go out there, he does his business, he works hard, and he still shares a home with his mom in upstate New York. So it's not only his elite baseball skills, but the character of the young man that he brings to the Mets organization. How do you see him blending in to what was really a great clubhouse atmosphere in 2024?
Well, John, you've already brought it up, and I think it's a great term. Character is everything. And when you had the makeup that the Mets had last year in that locker room, those guys respected each other immensely. They had each other's backs. They talked about it. They went out and did it on the field. And now you're adding another guy who, with great character, to walk in there, he's going to fit in just fine. And because of his work ethic, I used to say that about, when we made David Wright the captain, one of the things I told David when I asked him if he would consider it was, I said, look, you don't have to make any speeches. All you have to do is go about your job the way you go about it, knowing that you're the captain of this team. People are going to watch. And that's what I want. I want guys to emulate the way you go about your job here in New York with the New York Mets. And if they do that, we'll have something special. And this kid's the same exact way. We've all heard about the reputation. He doesn't go out. He doesn't drink. It's about baseball all the time and his family. And so when you're going to add that mix to already with the Brandon Nimmo's and the Lindors, and of course we hope Pete Alonso's back also, but those kind of characters that, are good people. Good, they're not just good players, they're good people. He's going to fit right in.
Yeah, and it starts with Mendy also. I mean, look at the relationship Mendy has developed
Right.
with his players, how much they love him and how much they play for him, and how great he's been as a first year skipper, and who achieved a lot more than people expected in this first year. So integrating Soto into the mix is going to be phenomenal. Ticket sales are going through the roof, so that makes Steve and Alex happy as well. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere at Citi Field in 2025. But I think there's still a missing piece here. And regardless of what you've signed and what the dynamic is, there's still that missing piece, and that is the number one most glaring free agent position right now, and that's the first baseman. That's Pete Alonso. In my personal opinion, and I know you're such a huge advocate of Alonso as well, the Mets have to bring him back. I mean, his legacy, homegrown, what he means to the franchise, what he means to the community, how passionate he is, what a good person he is, and to put him in the mix with Lindor, and I assume you're going to want to bat Soto if you're the manager, bat Soto second, and then protect him with Pete right after that. I mean, you got to bring Alonso back. What is the most important thing for you right now? Is it even more important to bring Alonso back now that they've signed Soto?
Well, and again, this is my opinion, John. Doesn't mean anything to anybody, but when you get a guy like Juan Soto, one of the first things you have to remember is that you better protect him in that batting line in the lineup. You've got to protect the guy. And yes, Mark Vientos had a tremendous year last year, and I hope he becomes a star. But you're asking a lot of a second-year player, not even a full year. He's had a portion of 1 year in the big leagues, and you got to be very careful hitting him behind Juan Soto because he is going to be pitched to. They are not going to let Juan Soto in certain situations beat them. So that's a lot of pressure to put on a young guy. So where you've got some veteran guys, and I'm going to start with Pete, a guy who's shown that he can drive in runs in New York. Okay, he had a down year. You're allowed to have a down year. The greatest players in baseball weren't stars every single year. They had down years. Well, so Pete had a little bit of a down year, but he knows how to play in New York. He's shown he can play in New York. He can drive in runs, and he's the perfect guy, in my opinion, to back up Juan Soto. Now, there are other guys out there. If Pete goes someplace else for whatever reason, you've got Goldschmidt. You've got, everybody's talking about Arenado's available. And so you've got some options, but I think you need to put a veteran guy who is not intimidated by any of those situations to hit behind Juan Soto. Because otherwise, you're going to ask a lot of a young player. Now, it may be Marte. I've heard his name mentioned, and maybe, because obviously with their outfield situation, he could be the guy that DHs. So you might want to put him behind Juan, but you've got to have, for me, a guy who's been there, who's done it on a regular basis in the big leagues, who puts a little fear in the other team's manager's head too.
Yeah, and you got to look at Vientos, as great as he was last year as a third baseman, and you're talking about protecting a guy like Soto if that was the case, but he also would be learning a new position as a first baseman,
Correct.
and that would put added pressure on Vientos as well. So, we hope Alonso comes back, and I think it's going to play out a little bit further. I mean, whatever the market is, whatever it's not in the analytics, and, Pete Alonso just turned 30. And I think he's in his prime. And what he did in Milwaukee last year in the postseason, that will leave an indelible memory in the history of the franchise. And personally, I hope they bring Pete back. I think he deserves it. And I could imagine a lineup with Lindor leading off, Soto second, Alonso third, Vientos fourth, and whoever else is going to be in that mix. But the other moves that have been made over the course of the last few weeks since the winter meetings and during the winter meetings, the Mets continue to make moves, especially with the pitching staff. They brought in former Yankee Clay Holmes and are going to convert him to a starter. Plus another arm in former Yankee Frankie Montas. And they lost Luis Severino, one of their free agents, to Oakland on a pretty robust deal. The pitchers are getting a lot of money, as we've discovered. The Mets ace from 2024, Sean Manaea, is still out there. There's some other frontline starters, but it looks like David Stearns is not really a fan of long-term deals for pitchers. What's your assessment on how David is building the 2025 rotation, and what work, in your opinion, needs to be done as the Mets offseason continues?
Well, as we saw last year, John, you can't have enough pitching. You just cannot have enough. So, and I liked the Clay Holmes situation. I did the show last week at SNY, This guy's been in like 377 Major League Baseball games, and he's got like 380 innings. So it tells you he's, his arm is, he's, even though he's been in big tense situations being the closer with the Yankees, this guy hasn't mounted a ton of innings, so his arm's probably going to be fine. So I kind of like that move because I love sinker ballers, because they get fast outs. They don't work up, they're not worried about striking guys out. They get them out and keep the game moving. I like that move. And even if you get some other pitching, and you've got a guy who could be a great eighth inning guy for you because he's proved it on the other side of New York. So I think that's a good move. I do believe they need another starting pitcher or two. I think, if they want to go with, Tyler McGill, I understand that. We're all hoping Senga comes back and being, what we want, what he should be. So you've got some options. You got David Peterson, who really had a nice year. So if you go out and you get yourself two more starters, and even though they're not Corbin Burns or, we lost Max Fried is off the charts, but, and I agree with what David's doing. I think you got to be careful giving pitchers, 6 and 7 year deals, because that's a lot of wear and tear on some major, especially in today's game with all the power that guys are using today, all the power deliveries. And so that beats that arm up pretty good. So I like the fact that he's gone out and got a couple of guys that, on 2-year deals or a year deal, paying them to come in. And he showed it worked last year. And so why couldn't it work again? You got to get the right guys, but they've got to go get themselves some pitching a little bit to protect themselves. Because one of the things we did see last year was that, a lot of them were 5-inning guys. And so now all of a sudden, Carlos Mendoza's got to work 4 innings of bullpen guys. So that just tells you've got to go find yourself some quality pitching.
Hey, with the way pitching is in this era, I mean, you almost have to be a magician to be able to figure out day to day, game to game, with all the moves, because your pitchers now are only going 5. But that philosophy by Stearns, not the long-term deals. I think maybe Manaea, if they do 3 or 4 years with him, that may be palatable for Stearns. But we'll have to see, because I know he's not going 8 years like the Yankees did with Max Fried. I know there's no 8-year deals in the Mets' future when it comes to pitchers, for sure. Ending off on the leadoff on some good news, and really some heartwarming news, is a big announcement was made just a couple of days ago that on July 19th, the Mets will honor David Wright at Citi Field, inducting him into their Hall of Fame and retiring his number 5. Tell us when you first heard the news, and if you've had an opportunity to talk to David since the announcement, and will you be there when the captain is honored?
Well, I did hear about it. I'm trying to think what day it was. I believe it was Saturday I was at the Queens Baseball Convention when the date was brought up. I called David when I got back from New York on Monday when I was in New York. I talked to him this past week. He's honored. He is who he is. He's very, very respectful of all the great Mets, and said, "Geez, I can't believe I'm going to be a part of that." Well, guess what? Had he not gotten hurt, he'd have been at the top of the list on every category offensively in the history of the Mets. So there's not a player that I've ever been around more deserving, in my opinion, more deserving of having his number retired and having going into the Hall of Fame for the team he played for, the only team he played for. And even though it's only 5 years after he stopped playing, that award, and I told him on the phone, that award is so deserving. And I said, your mother and father should be thrilled. I'm sure your family is. And yes, I will certainly be there for that day.
Excellent. I mean, he is so deserving of that. I was at his last game. I saw so many of his great moments during his Mets career, and the injury. As you said, if it wasn't for those injuries, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer without a doubt. So that's great news. And it's great to see that Cohens are continuing honoring these legends. And it's really such an interesting dynamic, Terry, when you look at the Cohen family and how much of a fan Steve Cohen was, and the fact that he's really embracing honoring this past history of the Mets. And so we say thank you to him, and I'm sure David is excited. And David really is always so humble anyway. But I think it's going to be a magical day on July 19th at Citi Field when David Wright gets his number 5 put up there with the other legends of the Mets. And I'll be there, and I know you'll be there. So it should be a lot of fun. Terry, as we wrap up this season, as we do each and every week, the Tunnel of Towers Foundation, right now, their Season of Hope is underway. They do this annually. And so right now, the Season of Hope for Tunnel of Towers is happening between Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. The foundation is paying off 40 of America's heroes' mortgages. And by the end of the year, they will have delivered more than 200 homes to Gold Star and fallen first responder families, as well as smart homes for the catastrophically wounded service members. If a first responder or service member is killed in the line of duty and leaves behind young children, Tunnel of Towers pays off their mortgage. Simple as that. This year, T2T's Homeless Veterans Program has broken ground on 7 new veterans villages. These renovated hotels and newly constructed buildings are now going to house nearly 700 vets who have struggled to find stability. And the villages also have a range of comprehensive support services, drug treatment, mental health, PTSD counseling, job training, and more. Over the past 2 years, Tunnel to Towers has provided housing for 10,000 veterans. Terry, I'm sure you feel the same way as I do when I say thank you to Tunnel to Towers for all they do, and their Season of Hope is just another example of it.
Yeah, no doubt, John. When we get off the air here, I'm going to do my part, and because I think I've been around them enough in this past summer to be witness to the job they do and the impact it makes on not, just with the first responders, the soldiers, the families. It's incredible. And when you're around and you listen to these people and you see the expressions on their faces when, they walk in and pay off a mortgage. And I mean, that's a huge burden off a mother's back or,
Yes.
a family's situation. It's just enormous. And to see the response they get and, some of the events I've attended with them, it's incredible. And Frank Siller should be absolutely applauded for the job he's done by, not just the soldiers and the first responders and their families, but by the American people who we should thank these people. And Frank's taking care of them. And I think it's a great situation.
Yeah, it certainly is. I actually attended, as you did down in Florida, you attended a groundbreaking for a village here in Franklin, Tennessee, where I reside. There was a groundbreaking on November 21st, and they broke ground on 3 smart homes for 3 vets that were injured. And it was just an amazing event. Like you said, when you told me about the one that you went to in Bradenton, and the pageantry and the military people that were there and the community, I experienced the same thing in Franklin, Tennessee. They had a helicopter fly over there. I mean, it was just well attended. They had some country music artists there singing. It was just an amazing thing, and we have been so proud to be a part of Tunnel of Towers over the course of this season here at the Terry Collins Show. And we're going to be back and talk about some of the highlights of this year on the Collins Show right after this word from the Tunnel to Towers and the Season of Hope.
Hi, everybody. I'm country music singer Chris Jansen. Tunnel to Towers Season of Hope celebrates the work that Tunnel to Towers is doing to help out our first responders, our military, and our nation's great veterans.
Having my mortgage paid off, I can never put into words what this means for me and my kids.
During this time of the year, they kick it into overdrive to help even more families.
Tunnel to Towers, it's given me a lot more than just hope.
All right, we are back, and Terry, this has been an interesting year for you to be in the interviewer seat. So I know how to be. We had some fun moments here over the course of the season. For me personally, it was Tom Hallion and yourself getting together to to review that ejection from 2016 and the ass in a jackpot, and you got to give us a shot. And to this day, that is still the number one viewed and downloaded episode that we had all season long. Tell me about some of your memories of that particular show and some of your favorites and some of the favorite interviews you've done this year.
Well, John, obviously the Tom Hallion one sticks out the most because, it was amazing. Well, that happened in 2016. And, the entire 2017 season, we did not have Tom Hallion as an umpire. That's amazing because, they rotate and rotate. And so that was the first time I ever got to talk to Tom about what happened. And, some of the information that he told me shocked me that, after that happened in 2016, Major League Baseball normally takes 24 hours to, take whatever clips they want out of, with the umpire being Mike. If they want to use anything on a show or a film, they get 24 hours, then the tape's destroyed. Well, 4 years later, that tape was still there. So how that happened, I cannot tell you, except it goes to show you that, when you heard Tom talk, his respect for the game and the sport is off the charts. He knew he was well aware of what was going on. He handled it great, as he always did. But that to me, because when I asked him about where he was when he heard about it, and he had just come out, he had just done a game, and came up, and his phone was lighting up, and he was shocked. He was shocked to death that it got out, as I was. So, but to hear his side of things, I again, my respect for him continues to grow because, he and I deal with this now on a daily basis because there's not a day goes by that I don't get a piece of mail that said, would you please sign this? You got to give us a shot. So, but that was a lot of fun. My reconnection with some of the guys that I haven't seen, I do get to see David, even though I love still talking to him, but to see Curtis Granderson. I love this Curtis Granderson. I love, John, the Noah Syndergaard interview. I mean, to hear his perspective, where he's at, how he's doing. And again, he now has a different respect for the game itself. Some of these guys are so good that the game's somewhat easy for them. And now when they're not in it, they realize how special it is and how much they miss it. And that's kind of what Noah portrayed to me during the interview, is how much he misses pitching and how he wants to get back out there. That to me was huge. Howie Rose, I mean, for me, one of the great storytellers, in sports. And so to have him on and to hear his impression of things, those were fun for me. And each and every time I finished the show, I would sit for a few minutes and say, wow, that was really cool talking to those guys. And, and Murph, I love Daniel Murphy. And to hear Murph talk about baseball and to talk about hitting, and it just shows you why he was good. There are certain guys who, they don't miss it. They don't miss a trick during the game. They pay attention. And Dan was one of those guys. So to hear that side of things, the interview with Darryl Strawberry, again, off the charts great. His perspective, his love of the game, and Doc, when Doc said, hey, look, I've made some mistakes. And, for me, accountability is huge. And to hear one of the greatest pitchers ever to say, hey, look, I messed up and I'm trying to fix it. Those things, to hear him on my show was really cool.
Yeah, one of my favorite guests was Murphy. We've had him on twice, and just how intelligent and what a sharp baseball mind he is. And I think the game would really, the game really should bring him in some capacity, because he's too smart of a baseball man to be out of the game. So I hope that somewhere down in his future. But I was a big Daniel Murphy fan when he played, and what an amazing person. And Terry, getting the opportunity, as you said, speaking to Doc, speaking to Darryl, getting Howie Rose, even you had Carlos Mendoza, the current manager of the Mets. You had Sandy Alderson. You could go on and on and on. In the 33 episodes that we did this season, some of the real historic names in the history of the New York Mets, and the fact that you are so respected by them, and these conversations, and it showed genuine joy on your part to be able to reconnect with some of these people and share these stories that are kind of insider stories, and share the analysis and the recollections of things that the fans don't normally get to hear. So it was amazing season. And I think today was our only cancellation on the Talking with TC.
Yeah.
But over the course of the 33 shows, it was like an amazing list of guests.
It was, John. But you brought up something a little bit ago about Steve Cohen, about his supporting the history of the Mets. That's a big statement, because there shouldn't be a player who is unaware of the past, of how he got to where he's at, and the people that forged the way to where we are today in the game. You just had a guy sign a contract for $765 million. And yet I have friends that I knew who were really good Major League Baseball. The great Sandy Koufax, 1 year he made $8,500 was his salary. And he pitched in the World Series on 2 days rest, and they won the World Series, and they got a $13,000 bonus. And I mean, and where the players are today, where I saw the World Series share this year, $475,000 or something was the World Series share. And these guys in today's game, they should realize the sacrifices guys made all along the way to forge where we are today, and they should respect those guys, and they should want to get to meet them and be around them, because when I did the fantasy camp with Ron Swoboda. Again, he's not bitter that he didn't make millions of dollars. He just loves the game and he respects the game, and I hope that every young player that ever gets to the big leagues, first and foremost, respects the sport itself, because that's what's going to enable them to make a living, and a very, very good living. If it wasn't for the game, we'd all be delivering papers. So, it's for me, and to talk to some of these guys as we went through this summer about their different experiences, just solidifies the fact that the game is in a good spot and played by great people, good people. And hopefully some of these guys like Murph, we got to get guys like Daniel Murphy back in the game, just as you said. Yeah. And because they can make an impact with our young players today.
Yeah, they certainly can, and it's just amazing to see what the revenue is in the game today and what the money is being paid out. And you talk about Sandy Koufax, you talk about Ron Swoboda. Back in the day, these guys all had to get off-season jobs, So from whether it was Richie Hebner, who was a grave digger, to so many others, Ed Kranepool and Ron Swoboda had a little restaurant on Long Island that they operated during the off season. So yeah, that legacy, that history, and where the game is today, we're in a much healthier place. So the game is changed dramatically, but don't forget the past, and don't forget the people who paved the way to bring you here. So that's a great way to end this segment. Terry, we're going to be back to wrap it all up after this segment. We have our final of the year, the Amazing Hero of the Week. And this one, we feature New York Mets Hall of Famer Johnny Franco. Let's go to that right now.
How's it going,
John.
Lenny, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys. Hi, I'm former pitcher John Franco of the New York Mets. Let's go Mets, and let's help the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. On 9/11, the team was in Pittsburgh, and the plane hit the World Trade Center. I immediately called home, and as I was on the phone with my wife, I saw the second plane hit. Born and raised here. This is my home. It's like a punch in the stomach. When I talk about it now, the hair stands up on my arms. I think about, obviously, the people who weren't firemen and policemen, who went to work that day just to put food on the table for their families. You think about the firemen who went into that building. You can't forget them.
This is the street sign. This is the door from the engine.
Coming down here at ground zero, we weren't sure if it was the right thing to do, but we wanted to help any way we can. But then when we got down here and we saw the firemen and the rescue workers, with all the soot on their face and sitting down, resting, and you could see how exhausted and sad they were. When there's a building on fire, most people are running out. these guys are running in. And for us to bring a t-shirt or a hat to them, they saw us, they smiled, they thanked us for coming down, make them forget for what they were doing just for a second. It made us feel good about that. We put a small Band-Aid on a big wound.
They fought for us. They sacrificed.
I know Frank Stiller, who started this Tunnel to Towers, and what they're doing around the country is an amazing job. I take my hat off because they are giving back. Their brother is a true hero. He was in Brooklyn, ran through the tunnel with his gear on. I mean, what more could you say? There's a reason why people from all over the world, all over the country come here to see that great tribute to all the fallen heroes and all the souls that were lost in the World Trade Center. Those 2 holes in the ground mean a lot to this country.
By giving $11 a month, you're joining us on our mission to do good. Go to t2t.org to make a positive impact.
Once again, we appreciate Tunnel to Towers Foundation providing so many inspirational stories and moments to us to share over the course of the season. And that one with Johnny Franco really stands out as well. We were able to shoot that at the World Trade Center in May of this year. So we had some of those amazing stories that we shared with you each and every week right here at the Terry Collins Show. And Terry, before we close out the show, I want to thank several people who were part of the season with us. First, thanks again to our presenting sponsor of the Terry Collins Show, and that's the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Special thanks to founder Frank Siller, to Larry Olson, to Peter Haskell. Also thanks to Z Media Ventures and your great production team who produced many of the videos that we've run this season on the show. I want to thank Mark Milliere for his help in assisting with some of the content early on in the season. A huge thank you to Dominic DiBiase, my nephew, who each and every week would send me show notes and some questions and some history facts. Another huge Met fan that you had an opportunity to have lunch with down in Port St. Lucie, Terry. So we want to thank Dominic for his help here. But before we close it out, too, I want to bring on for a moment our creative director who edited each program for us, came up with the graphics, the look of the show logo, and recorded this program each and every week. So he likes to be known as Marsh, and that is his name. He comes in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, each and every week. So, Marsh, why don't you pop on and say hello and let us know what getting into this baseball business has been like for you.
It's been cool. It's been really neat. For me, what I have enjoyed, apart from getting to know Terry so well, I've actually become a lot closer to friends and family members who have been obsessed with baseball their whole life, and I've just never been I've always enjoyed the game, but I've never been like a numbers guy. I've never been followed. I'm a Padres fan. You know what I mean? We lose all the time. So I just don't focus. I ask every year, how are we doing? And that's it. But this year I was able to have a lot more in-depth conversations about the game and talk about these players and learn about them. And it's been really cool to the point now where we go to the minor league games, me and my wife. She asks to go. Like, she comes home from work some days like, hey, is there a game? You know what I mean? I mean, not right now, obviously. But it's become really cool. It's been really neat. And so it's been an absolute joy and pleasure and an honor to work with some Albuquerque Hall of Famer, Terry Collins. It was so crazy the first time we went to the game. We went through the wrong entrance. There's a VIP entrance we accidentally went through and no one stopped us. And it goes through the Hall of Fame. And as we're walking through, I'm just kind of glancing and I was like, wait a second. That's Terry. And it was really cool to just sit there and see that. And so, yeah, now my wife loves to name drop when she's trying to impress her friends with what her husband does. He works at Terry Collins. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this project.
Oh, it was great, Marsh. Thank you for everything. You were best.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I work with Marsh on some pro wrestling podcast, and I've known you, Marsh, for how long now? 5 years? It's been 5 years around there?
Yeah, that's got to be about right, yeah.
Yeah.
He's
a good man. And we got him into baseball this year, so that's even very cool. Because now he actually texts me photos from the Isotopes games, and and he he's collecting baseball cards, and he showed me one yesterday. Look what I just pulled out of this pack. It was like a Yoenis Cespedes card.
Yeah, yeah, just randomly. Yesterday I pulled a Cespedes. I was like, hey, here we go.
It's been a pleasure this season, Marsh. All right. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
And, another huge thank you that we have to send out, and a shout out to Jay Horwitz. Jay is such an amazing guy. And I just love Jay as you do. And he's someone that, for whatever we needed, he was there to help. And he was so instrumental with Tunnel this year too, by assisting with getting Mike Piazza and working with us on some of the vignettes that they were able to do. And so shout out to Jay as well. It's been great. And Terry, it was an amazing season, and who could have predicted the excitement the Mets provided for us in 2024? Imagine if they were like in the cellar, what we would have talked about, but the Mets provided a good 2024 for all of us this year.
Yeah, it was a great year for them, and we're certainly rooting for them again as they get ready. I know this is a perfect time of year. This is when guys start ramping it up, because next month, in about 2 weeks, there'll be guys coming down here to Florida to go out to the complex, start working out. So it's going to get exciting real soon.
Yeah, it is. The season goes by, the off season goes by so quickly. Terry, personally, it's been truly an honor having to work with you this year. I've done a lot of cool things in my career, but getting to cover the Mets on a weekly basis with you was incredible. And I hope there is more to come in 2025. So Terry, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas and happy holidays, happiest of New Year's to you. And it's been a great year. So Merry Christmas, my friend. And
thank you, John. I appreciate it. You're unbelievable. What a tremendous host. And, I talk to our people, friends of mine, and watch the show, and they talk like you and I are, roommates, but so it's been a real experience, and thanks for letting me do this with you, and yourself. Have a great holiday and travel safe.
Thank you so much. And for Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. We wish you all the happiest of holidays. Merry Christmas. Very happy New Year. And let's go Mets in 2025.